Welcome to episode 9 of the How'd You Start podcast. We sit down with business owners, talk about how they got started. I am back with Brian DiYorio. So you actually have another business besides the woodworking business. For those listening, that was the last episode that you can go back and listen to or watch. What is the name of your other business?
So it's Carolina Premier Drone, and I do a lot of real estate photography is what I started, and we'll talk later how I expanded that as well.
Okay. How'd you come up with that name? Just something?
Just kind of what I came up with. I was trying to think of, if I make a business name of at the time I was just doing drone work, and it has expanded since then. I was thinking, what can I use just in case I ever moved somewhere? I didn't want to narrow it down to a very strict geographic area. So if I moved, let's say from the, Belmont, North Carolina area, and I went, to the East Coast, or let's say I go like to Tennessee, well, would it make sense to have Carolina Premier Drone or something or South Fork River Drone or something like that? I know I'm always going to stay in the North or South Carolina area. So I was like, hey, I'll just stick with that.
It's broad enough to cover no matter where you're at, where you're going to live. So, how did you get started in this business? Why did you start? When did you start? What's the story there?
Yeah, so several years ago, my full-time job as a police officer, the department had looked at getting a drone unit, and so they had sent several of us to a Part 107 introduction school to kind of figure out, hey, is this something that we're going to end up doing as a department? So I went to that, and probably about 2 years later, we actually started that unit. And so I started getting into drones and really enjoyed the flying. The photography side of things, I've always enjoyed that growing up. My dad did a little bit of that. And so then once I got into the drone side, I was like, hey, this is really cool. Coworker of mine, super lucky. His wife ended up getting a full-time job in Switzerland. So he got out of the grind of law enforcement and got to be still is a full-time stay-at-home dad with his kids in Switzerland. And he had a DJI Mavic Air. And he's like, hey, I can't take this with me. I'm going to try to sell it. And I said, yeah, I'm interested. So I bought it from him. Another friend of mine that I met through policing actually in South Carolina before I come to North Carolina, he had gotten out of policing and became a realtor and said, hey, I could use some drone shots. And so the kind of rest really was history from there. I went and did one shoot for him, and he's like, hey, I think you're onto something. I think you might be pretty good at this.
Did you initially start flying drones / learn how to fly drones for the police department?
That was the initial thing, yes. And then I ended up getting that Mavic right before we got our drones at the department.
And then did you end up doing the full Part 107, get the license? I
did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Was that test difficult?
Yes. Now, funny.
And what's involved? Is it more of safety? Is it more like don't invade privacy? What do they teach you most of?
It's changed a lot because it was very aeronautical, all the way down to like, what are these runway signs at the airport? What do they mean? And in the drone world, in reality, you're not landing a drone at an airport. So a lot of this stuff was extremely foreign. A lot of the weather stuff was usually pretty tough to get through because, again, for me, just as a layman guy, hey, it's raining, I'm not flying my drone. Right. It's windy, I'm going to drop my drone down, so knowing what all the different clouds were and all that stuff was pretty difficult. I ended up I did really well in the test. I'll tell a story about that in a second. But just a lot of preparation there was King School of Air, just tons and tons of tests on there over and over again. I'll be honest, I think I kind of, at that point, was just studying the questions and what the answers are, and then I'll get the knowledge as I move forward.
Mm-hmm. So you got the DJI was your first drone that you got from your buddy that went to Switzerland.
Yep.
And then you mentioned that you had a buddy that was doing real estate, and he needed drone pictures for his to list his.
Yep. Yeah.
Get the listing. Had you heard of that before? I mean, it was a thing, right? I mean, but did you know that, hey, there's business behind this, or what popped in your mind to get the business side of it, not just flying drones for the police department or for fun?
Well, going through that like introduction school that was taught, he talked about you had to be Part 107 certified to make money. And growing up, I've always been a really good friend of mine. We joke every time we talk on the phone. We're always coming up with, all right, how can we make money? That was kind of the joke growing up. And so, of course, when he was talking about making money with a Part 107, and my ears perked up, like, all right, what's my business opportunity here? But then I actually saw the reality of it, that, hey, there is a market for this. And at the time, the price was pretty good to be able to do that photography, because not a lot of people were doing it. I think today the market is very saturated on drone pilots trying to make money.
Obviously you have 1042 Woodworks as well. Which one came first?
The woodworking did.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and we talked in the last episode about woodworking started to supplement your off-duty through the police department. This started just by chance because your buddy needed somebody and you wanted to get paid for it, or did you see it as another, quote, side hustle to make even more supplement?
More initially as my friend needed it, and then I realized I could probably make some more money on the side. The overhead cost initially was a little expensive, but the reoccurring cost is not the same as woodworking. Once that drone's paid for, it's not like I'm not going out and for the wood side, I'm not going out and having to buy wood and then turn that into a profit. That the profit is my time being there taking the photos.
So you get your first job, it sounds like almost immediately.
Yep.
Your first customer came pretty quick. Did you know how much to charge him?
Nope. Had no idea. I kind of let him tell me how much he was going to pay me.
Okay.
And then I just started doing some research on, all right, what are other people charging? What's realistic? And again, I was fortunate enough, and still am fortunate enough in this aspect, that it's not my full-time job, so I don't need to price high on my products. I'm still doing it as a hobby and fun, and yes, I'm making money on the side of it. So,
how did you know what to do? I mean, you know how to fly the drone, but how did you know what angles he wanted? Was there any photography, cinematography, like the proper cinematography techniques, or did you just say, hey, I'm going to do a couple laps, take a couple pictures, and that's that?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, initially I kind of knew just looking at real estate photos what looks good a little bit, but a lot of that on that business was a lot of hours watching YouTube videos on what other people are doing, the 10 best real estate shots or whatever it may be. And that's how I really honed in on, okay, this is what looks good and this is what does not look good.
Did he like them?
He did.
Yeah.
I think it was like a 8-acre piece of property, but it was very narrow at the beginning and had this really long gravel driveway. And he asked, hey, could you fly it down the driveway and then, expose the building site where a house could be built? And so I did. And it was a pretty narrow gravel driveway. And he was like, dude, if you can do that, your money, man, you're on it. Like,
so he wanted video
good.
and photo?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Both?
Yep.
How did you know, did you already know how to edit at that point?
No. So the editing side, I ended up getting a software called Filmora Wondershare. At the time, I think I lucked out too, because I paid $99 for it and I get it for a lifetime. Now I think they're like on a yearly subscription. You can't buy it anymore for the lifetime. I got introduced to that because another two coworkers of mine were running a YouTube channel. They still are, but they were using that Filmora as their software, and they both did not have any experience, and they said this was a really good user-friendly software to start out with, and so that's what I ended up doing it.
Mm-hmm. So how did it go? So he liked it. You got paid based on, you kind of just learned, he paid you more of a tip at that point because he's your first customer.
Yep.
How did it go from there? How did you get your next customer? How did the business start to come about? I mean, you had the business, but how did it really start to get going from there?
Yeah, so I mean, growing the business, and again, I was very lucky to have that friend that was in real estate. I don't think I would still be doing this today had I not had him to keep me busy. He's a very good guy and very good. I don't want to say salesman because people always think salesmen are bad people.
Negative connotation with it. Yeah, right.
But he's a very good realtor. So his business picked up on the realtor side, which then in turn made mine pick up.
He called you exclusively?
Yeah.
He only called you?
He still does.
And he did it on every listing?
any listing that he needed aerial photography, he was calling me. And again, he still does now, and he's done so well. He went from just being a realtor to owning his own firm. I'd have to look at. I know he's probably got 20 plus agents that work for him now, and that's where it started to grow. Was
they all call you?
Not all of them, but several of them still do. But that's how it kind of grew. Because some of the agents that he got in to his firm were already previous agents, so they already have their people that they're using.
So to this day, it kind of started taking off and growing. From then to now, let's say, is that your only customers? Or have they started to talk to, and if they are your only customers, sounds like it's more than plenty. If there's 10, 15 of them calling you, you can stay pretty busy, especially for just a part-time side gig. But, or do you have a website for this business? You do?
Yep, okay. CarolinaPremierDrone.com. So it did grow. They also spoke to other agents, and that compounded into me doing other agents outside of his firm as well, too. We can talk later about the marketing. I've done more marketing, picked up jobs through that. There's also several platforms like droners.io. If I'm a person that I need some photography, and a lot of times these are folks that buy land sight unseen, or they may have a client that owns a bunch of property that Dollar Generals are on, and they're looking at selling the property to somebody else. They can request pilots in the area, so these jobs come out, and you might have 20 pilots, bid on the job. They'll say they got a budget of 100. Most of the time, those folks are looking for the cheapest they can. So if you bid 100 and the other guy bids 99, they'll go with the 99 on it. So I've picked up some on there. That market's pretty saturated, so I don't spend a lot of time focusing on those. I still get a lot of requests for there. But I really just focus on the realtor side of stuff.
To this day, do you still just have that initial drone?
No. I ended up getting another one, so I've got the Air 2S now. Probably getting ready to buy another one just to keep up with the times on there.
Well, that was my next question. What's the purpose? It's just to be the newer technology, the better quality, that sort of stuff. And, okay, so let's talk about the marketing. So how did you learn how to market, how to advertise? Where have you found to be the best place? Kind of all that stuff.
Yeah, so, kind of goes back to that last episode, was at those small business parts of the community college, going to those classes and learning Google, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. But most of my marketing that I've done for that side of the house was all done on Google. I was able to land a couple jobs from that. I haven't
paid ads.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I haven't done any lately, again, just because I've been so busy with other stuff where I don't feel like I can have the capacity to increase to that. But I picked up actually a decent sized job for a apartment complex that was being built in South Park down there in Charlotte by the mall. And I ended up, I'd met another guy that got a drone business over there on the west side of Charlotte, Blue Pearl Drones. He had reached out to me, was asking, hey, how did you start your business? I'm thinking about starting mine. In talking to that guy too, just real fast on that, a lot of people are afraid to give other people tips about the business because they fear that you're going to take my customers. But at the end of the day, I kind of knew, like, hey, if I got a good product, people are going to come to me anyways. And, if there's enough out there for other folks to have a, slice of the pie. So I ended up calling Jerry, his name. So I called Jerry and said, hey, I got this big project, man. Can you come help me? Because he actually had a better drone than I did. And I said, look, I'll split the cost with you, and then that way you can get some recognition too, because I think they're going to try to pump us out as well too. So
how in that kind of business, what prevents one of your customers from just going and buying their own drone? Is it that you have a license, they don't? Is it the quality of your drone? Is it the way you do it? All of it combined? I
think all of it combined. Some people will do it without the license, but there's a lot of repercussions people don't think about on that. that you can get in some pretty good trouble for, charging people for aerial photography and not having that license. And then, some of it is like people will go out and they buy a drone. They think they can just put it up, take some photos, and call it a day. Now, some people do that, and I mean, you see the difference between somebody that's taken the time to craft that, the ability and the skill.
Mm-hmm. So to this day, is 100% of your customer base of the type of jobs you do real estate photography, or have you gotten into like surveying, geomapping, any of that sort of stuff?
Haven't gone that far on the survey, geomapping. I've got two people now that are like kind of landscaping businesses that do like hardscapes, patios, things like that. I picked up JT Grading out of Shelby. They used to just do grading, but they've expanded to doing, again, hardscapes, concrete work, things like that. Through one of my advertisements, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we need a project shot. Can you come do this?" So I did. I went out there, and talking to them, I guess they had a bad experience with the person that had already shot this project, and they hadn't gotten their photos back, and it had been like 3 months. And they were like, "Hey, we saw what you were doing on your social media. We like it." So I knocked it out, and since then they just use me for that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah,
too.
so it's almost like you're doing marketing material for other people.
Yeah,
B2B.
Yeah,
B2B sales.
Yeah.
Have you ever? Do you want to scale this up to where you're doing like super high end, like car commercials or like really Hollywood level type stuff, or maybe not quite there, but higher end stuff? Do you want to get to that point?
I've dabbled with it a little bit. I just did I wouldn't call it a commercial. You could turn it into a commercial. They wanted about like a minute and a half thing to go on their website, a video of Spake Concrete over there in Shelby as well too, and it kind of highlights all their products and everything. It could easily be turned into a commercial. I've done some stuff for realtors where it's last one I did, Anthony Hillman over there at Caldwell Banker, Mountain View. His daughter is interviewing him, asking him questions why people should use him in real estate. So I've done some of that and dabbled in there. I mean, I could do it. I don't know how far I would scale it.
How did we talked about it a minute ago. How do you know what to do when you get to the job as far as the shots and all that? But do you ever get customers that say specifically, like, I mean, it's one thing that they're going to say, "Hey, we want to showcase this patio." Got it. But do they say, like, do they ever get super specific with what they want? Like, we want a panning shot from here that loops here, like very detailed, almost like an instruction manual, and you just got to follow it? Or do they kind of leave the air quote creative freedom up to you, or what's the typical?
Most of it's just kind of the creative freedom. Every now and then I'll get some people, and it won't be the realtors, but it might be their clients that say, "I want something specific for my house that I'm getting ready to sell." Like a twilight photo or something along those lines.
Are those hard to get? Not twilight photos, but very specific. Well, maybe twilight photos. You have to time it just right.
Yeah. If you're going to get a true twilight, you got to time it right. In today's world, there's tons of editing that can make it look twilight now as well too. But sometimes you'll get people that, "I want a real twilight," and so then you got to time when the sun is going to go down. And then my first drone, the battery, I'd be happy if I got 14 minutes of flight out of that battery. And on the new one I got now, I can run about 25 minutes or so on a battery. And of course, that's all weather dependent. So I mean, those twilights, you've got a small window of opportunity to get what you need to. And if you're having to drop the drone down, change the battery, get it back up, and especially with those older ones, you had to recalibrate the compass every single time. So you might miss what you just drove, 40 minutes for to get here. So,
yeah. Is there, what is your radius geographically? Do you have one, or you'll go wherever people pay?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go wherever people will pay. Of course, I try to stay as closer to home as I can. For newer folks, I don't go too far out. If it's somebody I've never worked with before, I might require them to give me a deposit before I drive, so far out there. But again, developing those relationships with those realtors that I work at now, like today, I drove up to China Grove, and that was for the guy that owns that company now. happy to drive that far for him. Just, of course, we're friends. And
Is most of your customers reoccurring customers?
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about pricing your work then. We talked about the drive is going to play some stuff into it, but is it a flat rate like a mobilization? Is it by the hour? Does the time start when you leave your house? We talked about your woodworking business. It's completely different. Woodworking you can do in one spot in a shop, making products that you either ship or take to the brick and mortar location. This is the exact opposite. The only thing you're doing in your house or in your office is the editing. Everything else is on site. So what's the pricing? How do you price?
Yeah, so same way, kind of back with woodworking. I knew I wanted at least $25 an hour, roughly, is what I would have made in that off-duty gig. So that's kind of how I started the pricing. And as I evolved, I kind of learned, all right, let's put some packages together. Not only just doing the aerials, and I got into the interior. Ended up buying a Nikon camera, so doing that, and then again looking around, what are other people offering? How can I take bits and pieces of other people's skills and what they offer, and how do I turn that into to my business? And so now I just got different packages that
Yeah, so you mentioned buying a Nikon camera, so you're doing like regular photography, not drone stuff. So as an add-on.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So, and I've even gone as now I even do square footage calculations. So I started with just doing the aerial photography, and then so my buddy Travis owns that Caldwell Banker Mountain View. Talking to him, I was busy, but I could grow it some more, and so I kind of asked him like, hey, what else can I offer for like to get realtors to want to, hey, let me make sure I'm always using Brian, or what's going to make it easier. And so he had said, hey, do some interior shots as well too. So that's how I got into that. And then again, I had room to grow, so I asked him, and he said, if you could do square footage calculations, you're almost a one-stop shop where we don't have to have 3 different people or 2 different people come in. And so now a lot of it is, all right, I'm going to call Brian, his company. I come in, do the interior shots, do a video as well, do the aerials, and I measure the house too. And so then they don't have to call anybody else.
Yeah, how do you do the square foot calculations? Is it the old school method of just measure length and width of each room, or is there a simpler, quicker way to do it?
Yeah, so Travis sent me the guidelines from the North Carolina Realtors Association for square footage, whereas before I would have thought you would have just done a square and called it a day, and there's a square footage, and it's not the case. There's a lot of different things. Ceiling height, is it heated and cooled? Is it basement? There's all kinds of different things that go into that. And if you're measuring from the inside, if you're measuring to an exterior wall, you have to add more distance onto that. If you're going through, I think it's 3 inches for interior walls. There's tons of different things there. Simplest and easiest way, I've got a laser pointer, a measurer now. And yeah, if you can do everything from the outside, it's much easier. And I ended up getting some Apex software now. And I have a Microsoft Surface. I'll walk around and it's shoot the distance, start drawing it, and then it will do the calculations.
So it's almost like just in the drone business, you have 3 different aspects, because you have the square footage, the interior photography, and videography.
Video,
right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then the drone exterior photography and videography. How did you learn the traditional photography and videography? Flying a drone, you knew, but did you already have some? Because in my mind, and you tell me if I'm wrong, it doesn't seem like it translates over perfectly even. It's not like if you know how to fly a drone, you're going to know how to be a regular cinematographer on the ground. So how did you learn that sort of stuff? Yeah,
of course, like angles and bracketing. And bracketing is just taking 3 different photos. One's going to be a long exposure, short exposure, and normal, and then you merge those photos together to get a very good, clear photo. Those things will kind of translate over, but then interior shooting of a house is much different than aerials. A lot of that was leaning on Travis, because he had been doing his own interior shots, and then again, YouTube is a great resource. going there and finding out, what's a good way to do that, to take inside shots, and, knowing that when you're doing interior shots on a house, you should always try to get 3 walls in there. And then, when you start doing it, you're like, oh, that does make sense. That looks a lot better than me just taking a
corner.
Yeah, a corner or something, yeah.
Would you say what percentage of the jobs that you do now, you do all 3 of those, the square footage calculation? Like, is that almost every one, or is it primarily still just drones?
Most of everything is interior and drones, and I'd probably say 50% are measurements. Some realtors just love to do their own measuring. Like Denise Wright with Caldwell Banker Mountain View, she loves doing her measuring, but she'll have me come out and do the photos and video for her.
Do you have any that only do square footage and interior? Like, are there some that don't even call you for drones anymore?
Yeah, sometimes,
or that you've acquired, customers that you've gotten that do not want drones, they only do the.
And I think it's more of I wouldn't say it's a customer. I think it's their project, if you will, or their listing what it needs. Sometimes the house isn't the best for like aerial photography. Maybe it's surrounded by trees, so all you're going to be getting is a rooftop and some trees from the air. So really, I think it's just more of a case by case what that realtor, what their listing is going to be.
Mm-hmm. So we talked a minute ago about, do customers ever give you specific shots they want and all that? And we talked about that. But do you, they give you the creative freedom, you take all these shots of videos and photos, do you send the entire thing to them, or do you handpick the? And what I mean is, like, if you're taking 400 pictures, I know you're probably not sending 400 pictures. You might send them 40. But do you say, here's a shot down the driveway and a shot up the driveway, and let them pick what they want, or do they just get what they get?
Yeah, I guess a mixture of both. I'll try to send at the bare minimum like 2 photos of every room so they can choose stuff. If it's a giant room, 3 or 4. The aerials, I usually do all the cardinal directions and, south-southwest or whatever it may be. And then just now I've gotten used to each realtor that I do a lot of work with. I know what they're looking for. So now I'm able to send exactly what they're wanting.
Them specifically, custom, because you've worked with them and you know them. And we talked about pricing your work with packages. Does the package, I'm assuming it not only includes either drone, interior, and or square footage calculation, but also you probably have a number of images / videos per package, right? Somebody that you're giving 50 pictures to is probably going to pay differently than somebody you're giving 5,000 pictures, or
Yeah. So there's typically like 3 different packages, and one's just maybe like 15 photos, and then the next upgraded one is going to be 25 photos. Okay. And really, in actuality, especially with the realtors I work with the most, like the package might say you're going to get 25 photos, but I've worked with them so much, like sometimes they've got a really big house, I'm sending them 45 photos or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Would you say that you stay busier with this than you do woodworking, or which one's busier right now? Or on average, not right now specifically, but.
No, last year the drone side was busier, and I think some of that was I was building my wood shop out back, so that was kind of slowed. But I think it's 50-50 on it right now.
50-50 money-wise or time-wise?
Time-wise.
Time-wise?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, because again, the drones can be, if you're driving 2 hours or what, things can be different. Have you ever crashed a drone?
Yeah. Another coworker of mine had gotten out of policing and was doing real estate, working for Travis. And it was actually really funny. He'd gotten into real estate, and his first listing was an over $1 million home. And in Charlotte, and so he called me to come out there, and so I was out there doing that, flying, and the clients of his were talking about the leaves on the roof. They're like, we'd really like if the leaves weren't there. And I was like, well, I've playing around in my house, flying around. I've cleared some leaves with the drone. So I'll just kind of fly up there by the roof a little bit and
Just the downwash of the propellers?
yeah. So I'll just fly up there a little bit and kind of push those off. And I was doing that, and I guess I didn't realize I got a little too close and it hit the corner. And luckily it didn't break the drone or anything. It just busted up some propellers. I was able to swap those out and get flying again. It was funny because that client came out and the wife was almost talking to the drone like it was a dog or something. And I'm like, is it okay? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Like, we'll put it back in the air. But I was thinking, like, oh my gosh, man, dude, you just got your first listing. It's $1 million home, and I just clipped the corner. Thankfully, there was no damage to their house or anything whatsoever. It was definitely a loud noise. But yeah, yeah, that was an embarrassing moment. And thankfully, there was nothing I had to report to the FAA, so that was good.
What would you have to report?
Like if it did some severe property damage, or let's say like the wife was standing underneath it looking at it, and when it crashed it hit her and sent her to the hospital, then you've got to report those types of things.
Similar question as with 1042 Woodworks. Is there a goal in mind to grow this and scale it up? What is the next milestone? What is the next goal?
Yeah, I mean, I have scaled it up some more. I've actually have 2 coworkers that every now and then, if I'm not available to go do some photography, they'll be independent contractors for me, and they'll go knock out the project.
That's cool.
And again, a lot of that is just life happens, and so I haven't scaled it up as much more. I mean, I think I could. I guess I'm not looking at it to scale it up too much more right now, but yeah.
So they're using your drone when you subcontract it out?
Sometimes they'll use mine, or they have their own.
Do they know how to do it the way because you've built these relationships with realtors and stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with them? You're putting your faith into them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt. So when they saw what I was doing and they got their 107, they asked about, hey, if you ever need anybody, I'm like, that's fine. And so they would actually tag along for a couple projects before I kind of was comfortable saying,
let them fly the coop.
You're on your own to,
Yeah, be safe, don't have them flying over the neighbor, and then also just getting the shots that the realtors expect you to get. The quality, same setup. You mentioned your website earlier. Do you have social media for this?
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram as well. Those are the 2.
And it's Carolina
Premier Drone.
Premier Drone.
Yep.
Do you get a lot of customers off of social media? I'm assuming, do you post samples and pictures and videos and stuff on social media?
Yeah.
Because this is a very visual business and product. So, I mean, and social media is great for visual and stuff. So do you get customers from social media?
I've gotten a couple. One of them was way out in Waxhaw, so she didn't really use me as much because that's such a far drive out that way, and she had already had somebody. She just needed me to kind of fill in. So sometimes I'll get one-offs like that, where, hey, they've got their person, but their person's on vacation. We saw your stuff. We'd like you to come shoot. So,
do you ever get customers that it's like a 911, like they don't give you any heads up, and they're like, hey, this, or is it pretty much scheduled?
We try to schedule it as much, but with my full-time job too, a lot of times the realtors will text me and say, hey, what do you got in your next 2 weeks? And then I'll say, hey, I'm off on these days, or they might send me a day saying, hey, can you do this day? And I might be able to juggle my work schedule around where I can take that day off or get off early, or I'll tell them, no, hey, can you do it the next day? And that's kind of right now how the scheduling works. But every now and then I'll get people that will call and say, like, hey, I got a project. Can you shoot it tomorrow? No, I can't. Sorry. Yeah.
So you're juggling the full-time job, 1042 Woodworks, and Carolina Premier Drone.
Yeah.
Of your 2 side hustles, which one's your favorite? They're both your babies, but which one? Is there one?
It's tough.
Would you get rid of one to solely do the other if you could, if the money worked, if the time worked? Is there one that would take the cake if it
was solely time and money? I would get rid of the woodworking
and just do drones
and just do the drone, because again, the overhead cost on the drone side, the reoccurring cost on the drone side, is a lot less than what it is on the woodworking.
And I imagine the maintenance, because you're dealing with one machine, a drone. Yeah. Woodworking, you're dealing with 14 machines, sanders, saws, seeing. So,
yeah, I mean, with a camera and 2 or 3 different lenses. That's all you need for a long time. Yeah, whereas, like a miter saw, you're having to change out the blade every so often or whatever it may be, so.
Do you have to have insurance for drone stuff? And what does insurance, what's it for? What's it cover? Is it just for crashing into someone or what?
So it's not required, but again, definitely recommended. So I go through Skywatch, and it does cover, like if at that house had I done some damage to it, then that insurance clause would cover that. I'm sure they probably wouldn't like that I was trying to clear some leaves. Or if it crashed and hit somebody, then there's some personal liability injury coverage, and that runs me about $80 a month. But again, it's a nominal cost for I feel comfortable while I'm out, flying. Yeah,
and sounds like it's a fixed cost too. You just budget that into when you price the next job or whatever. So you mentioned that you're not desperate to scale up, but do you have ideas of things that you could do to scale up, and what would they be?
Yeah, so it would be a mixture of like scaling up and making it easier. There's several software or website platforms out there that photographers can use, and they've kind of branched into drone side as well too, or cinematography. So you're talking about that scheduling where the realtor will text me. I'm lucky enough to have that relationship with those people that have been working long enough. But when I get somebody that's brand new that says, hey, I've got a date and I need it by this time, because a lot of on the realty side of stuff, like their clients say, I'm ready to list my house. I want it done by Friday. So they're pressed for time. And so somebody new may call me and I might not be able to do it that day or something, but there's some softwares out there to allow me to like put my schedule online and kind of make them a platform. And even within that software, they've got, if they pick one of my packages that we were talking about that, hey, I want video, I want inside shots, outside, and square foot measurements. I want it all. Well, that's great. They'll pick that package, but then it allows for some upsell of things. And those upsell of things can be like we were talking about, the editing of making twilight photos. Or it could be, let's say they don't do the whole package. They do just the square measurements and inside photos. It might pop up. I could have it pop up and say, hey, for 5 aerial photography photos, it's only going to cost you, $20 more. Because again, in reality, that time of me to do 5 photos is not going to be that far. So I guess in the upscale or making more money out of it, I've been looking at doing some of those to see if that makes maybe the scheduling easier to me to get new clientele. They will see I can go in and plug, I'm available this day. So like if I've got in service with my full time, so in service would be like our firearms training or something. I can block out those dates. And talking about those 2 guys that do some work for me, I can kind of plug their schedule in too. So if I'm not available, then maybe one of them's available to handle the project.
Mm-hmm. How much time do you spend editing? Because that's a bit photography, video. There's a lot of time that goes into editing. Sometimes, maybe not in your case, but how much time do you spend editing? Because you're not only getting all these shots, but you're getting video and photos. You're getting video and photos on 2 different types of devices, a drone versus a camera inside. Is that a long process, or how long does that take?
Yeah, at the beginning it was definitely long, and that's because of that learning curve. But now you kind of get into styles and knowing your shots. And so we'll talk about videography first, kind of knowing what flows well, what doesn't flow well. I try not to always make my videos the exact same way for everybody, because then it can get very monotonous and there's no lack of excitement, I guess, as if you will. But your gist of it, learning those things makes that process go by so much faster. Whereas at the beginning, it would have probably taken me 2 hours just to do a minute-long video, just because I didn't know what I was doing. And again, YouTube's a great resource. And watching and learning from people out there talking about what they've been doing, and then so honing that craft down. And then same thing on the photo side. It took a little while with like the Adobe, Lightroom, Photoshop, learning those things. The nicer thing about real estate photography editing versus editing for something that you're going to sell to somebody that's going to be up on a wall, or portrait photos, you're not doing as much touch up. So
they want it to look nice, but once the home sells,
that's it.
It's not going to be seen in your living room at every holiday by every family member.
Yeah. So the editing's not as strenuous on that. And again, once you kind of get used to doing that auto bracket and putting those 3 on there, and gosh, with the advent of a lot of like AI stuff, you can plug those 3 things in there and it will automatically do a lot of that for you, and it looks good.
Have you ever had one-off customers, meaning like Miss Johnson down the street wants a picture of something, like that kind of one-off?
No,
not really.
I'm trying to rack my brain. I don't think I've ever had like a one-off where somebody wanted,
some aerial picture of their new truck, or I don't know, bad example, but
no. Now, I mean, I've used my photography business to augment my woodworking business on a couple things. I had a project, a guy up in Youngsville, owned a trucking company, or his friend owned the trucking company. He was an investor banker kind of guy, and he wanted a 6-foot-long wood flag. So in my wonderful single-car garage, I knocked out this giant flag, and then that thing was huge. And at the time, I had a Hyundai Elantra, and my wife had a Impala, and it barely fit in the Impala. But we took it up to a local high school here, and I kind of set it out on the front of the car, and then used my drone and kind of did some shots with that. And then and again, as I've grown from just doing aerial stuff, I use some of that equipment for the woodworking side. But that was very interesting, because I had to meet this trucker guy in South Charlotte at some factory that he was picking up other stuff, but he had room on his 53-foot flatbed and had to box this thing up, and he strapped it down, and I was like, man, this is wild.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Sounds good, man. Appreciate you doing that with me, this podcast with me. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you're listening to this, give it a 5-star review. Appreciate it, man.
Yep. Thank you.